You're listening to Inside Israel Today with Gil Hoffman on the Land of Israel Network.
Hello and welcome to Inside Israel Today, broadcasting from Jerusalem only 2 weeks before our exciting election. Perhaps our second election of three, perhaps our second election of many more. Perhaps we will just go on forever, having election after election after election, in which case I will have plenty to do and the people of this country will go insane. But, ladies and gentlemen, as we go into these final 2 weeks, when the politicians are actually going to start spending their money that they've been saving the entire summer, when they realize that Israelis were on vacation or too wrapped up with their children and wouldn't really be able to listen to them, and after this week where they were just getting their kids used to school, as we get into this part of the election campaign that finally matters with 2 weeks left, I want to present you with an interesting scenario that I've been thinking about for a while, which is that perhaps the election that we have here is not just connected to the election in America. We've mentioned that before, where this election being a microcosm of the American election, where the politicians running against Netanyahu are using tactics that could be used by the Democratic candidate against Donald Trump in the American election because of the similarities that there are between Netanyahu and Trump. Maybe actually this election will lead to an election that was similar actually to what we just had in Britain. Now, to get to that understanding, I have to go through a long process here, and I hope that I'll keep your attention. Perhaps this election is not the second, as we've been talking about all along. Perhaps it is the sixth election out of 12. All right? Now, take out a pen and paper if you still use those, or take out a computer or an iPad, and count with me to 12. Let's see if I can do this. Okay? The first election that we had was actually October 31st of 2018, less than a year away. The people of Israel went to the polls, and they had a very impressive turnout in the elections that they had for mayors and city council people all over the country. That election resulted in Moshe Feiglin being elected mayor of Jerusalem. And Beit Shemesh elected a woman, non-ultra-Orthodox mayor, which made news. The mayor of Haifa is a woman. And the mayor of Tel Aviv stayed on. Again, he's been mayor since, I think, before I was born, maybe. But that election was already Israelis getting into politics and getting involved and going out to vote. Shortly thereafter, on December 24th, is when Netanyahu initiated election number 2, the election for the Knesset. And the results of that election were relatively inconclusive. 35 seats for Likud, 35 seats for Blue and White. And Netanyahu, though, did have 65 seats on the right, which is very much a victory if the blocks are what decides. But actually, that's not what decides. What decides is if you can form a government, which leads us to election number 3, which was an election of one man, President Reuven Rivlin, who had to decide who would form a government. And he decided on Netanyahu. And even if it is an election with one man, it is an election, a very, very important election. That leads us to election number 4, which was the election of the Knesset members. Netanyahu had to get the support of 61 to form a government. He got instead, he got 60. That is not enough to form a government. The Knesset voted no to Netanyahu. Then you had election number 5, which was the election to disperse the Knesset, to go to another election. There you had 120 Knesset members voting there, and a majority of them decided to go to the election. Okay? And that led to the election that we have going on right now, which is election number 6. The election for the current Knesset, September 17th. This election, it's important that you vote, but you're not going to really decide who the next government is going to be, because we have a very important election coming up, election number 7, in which the Knesset speaker, in which the president, we'll get to the Knesset speaker later, in which the president, Reuven Rivlin, again, is going to decide who's going to form a government. And there he's going to look at who's the largest party. Right now, there are some polls that say it'll be blue and white. There are some polls that say it'll be Likud. Okay. That's not going to decide who he's going to pick. He could look at the largest bloc. And there's no doubt the right bloc is larger if you include Avigdor Lieberman. But that's not what will make him decide election 7. What will make him decide election 7 is the recommendations. Because you have the party heads, 9 parties are expected to cross the electoral threshold. Sorry to our listeners from Otzma Yehudit who are very excited that they're getting close of getting into the threshold. No, they won't. 9 parties. And those 9 parties will represent 120 Knesset members. Right now, the way it's looking is the majority of them are going to recommend Gantz to form a government. You have the Arab Party that the last elections did not recommend anyone to form a government. This time, they're saying that they're going to recommend Gantz. Lieberman recommended Netanyahu to form a government last time. This time, he says he's going to recommend the party that is in favor of a unity government, which is a very nice way of saying he's recommending Benny Gantz. So there, the president would have no choice. If you have more than 61 Knesset members saying they will not join a government led by Netanyahu, which is what's happening, and they would join a government led by Gantz, Gantz will be given the first opportunity to form a government. Can he form a government? No! There are not a majority of Knesset members willing to sit together with other parties under Benny Gantz. When it comes to election 7, that election is decided by hate, by who can sit with Netanyahu and a majority cannot. But while there are more than 61 Knesset members who hate Netanyahu, there are not 61 Knesset members who love each other enough to build a coalition. Building a coalition, which is election number 8, is about love. Okay? Love is not the most powerful force in the world. Hate is the most powerful force in the world, especially when it comes to Israeli politics. But hate is easy. Anybody can hate. Love is complicated, especially in politics. So that election number 8, which is about building a government, about love, Gantz is going to fail. That will lead us to election number 9, when Netanyahu gets a chance to form a government. Can Netanyahu form a government? Well, no. There are not 61 members of Knesset willing to sit under Netanyahu, but perhaps with his back against the wall, nobody wants to have a third election, then maybe he can. No, he can't. There still won't be 61 members of Knesset, because then people are going to remember, actually, it doesn't initiate an election if he can't form a government. It initiates a loophole, which is that once the president is asked 2 people to form a government, then the job is given to the Knesset speaker. The Knesset speaker, Yuli Edelstein, will then be given a chance to ask someone to form a government. And that is when you could see the Likud decide to hold a snap election. Not an election of the entire people voting, but a Boris Johnson style election like you had in Britain. When Boris Johnson was elected leader of the Conservative Party, he automatically, barring a rubber stamp vote, from the parliament that he then is suspended, they let him be the prime minister. The members of the party decided the prime minister. That is what could happen in election 10, where the people who happen to be members of Likud for 14 months, the minimum amount, would be eligible to decide the prime minister of Israel. You're talking about 80,000 people about. All right? Still following me? So that election will be a very exciting election. You'll have about 15 people running for leader of Likud. There have been only 4 leaders of Likud going back to the 1930s, as opposed to the 14 people who've been leader of the Labour Party over the last 15 years. Exaggerating only a little bit there. So that will be the most exciting election in Israel's history, I believe. And then the person who would then form the government, vote that there would be in the Knesset approving his coalition would then be election number 11. All right? Now, I said that there were 12, and so I have to correct something. If I count an election that is for leader of Likud, where the members of a party vote, well, then I have to accept that in Israeli democracy, there are not too many parties that still hold votes for their leader. And so I really actually have to also count an election that I did not count before. I have to go back, if I write this up for the Jerusalem Post, and put it in the right order, which was the election for leader of the Labour Party, where the Labour Party decided to replace Avi Gabay and have a new leader, and Amir Peretz was chosen over Stav Shafir and Itzik Shmuli. So there have actually been 12 elections, or will be 12 elections, of which we are currently on election number. Producer, have you done the math? This would be 7, not 6. Now, if this all really happens, and someone who is not Netanyahu, but is in Likud, forms a government, that person, ladies and gentlemen, can form the most stable government we have had in a very long time. Because look at the numbers. The people of Israel are overwhelmingly in favor of the Likud's ideology. But there are plenty of people who are in favor of Likud's ideology who don't like Netanyahu for whatever reason. Because he's been in power for too long, because he's seen as serving himself at the expense of the people too much, because of his criminal investigations, because of his wife and his son. There's plenty that people don't like about him, according to the polls. But once he is out of the way, parties that exist and politicians who are not in Likud because of hatred of Netanyahu or his hatred of them are going to be able to come back. Ayelet Shaked will be in Likud. There's no reason for the Israel Beiteinu party to exist anymore. That party was formed because Lieberman couldn't get along with Netanyahu anymore. Naftali Bennett worked for Netanyahu, couldn't get along with him anymore. Netanyahu's hatred of Ayelet Shaked, that was revealed in a tape last night, it was broadcast on the news, shows that there was no way she could have even dreamed of joining Likud when he was still there. Moshe Feiglin just rejoined Likud. The people of Israel are over there. And whoever is that person who would win that election number 11 for leader of Likud would be able to be prime minister, I think, for 4 years. Because the people of Israel, except for me, are very sick of elections. And after having 12 since October 31st of 2018, less than a year ago, I think are going to want to just make do with what we have. And I'll just end by saying that we have an election coming up for president because the term of Reuven Rivlin as president is going to be finishing up in another year and a half. But other than that, I think the people of Israel are going to be so sick of having elections that they'll just cancel elections for student councils and for heads of the homeowners associations in their buildings, and just say, just whoever wants it, just take it. No more. I've had enough. Stay with us. After the break, we'll have more politics inside Israel today.
I call for a vote.
I'm not voting for her.
Only an idiot would vote for me.
Well, I didn't vote for you.
You should know who to vote for.
Who are you going to vote for in the upcoming election? Hi, this is Josh Haston, host of Israel Uncensored on the Land of Israel Network. Full election news and analysis that you're not going to get anywhere else. That's the Land of Israel Network at thelandofisrael.com. Keep it locked in.
If you vote for me, all of your wildest dreams will come true.
And we're back here on Inside Israel Today on the Land of Israel Network on the landofisrael.com, where I hope you had your scorecard, ladies and gentlemen, for the first part of our show, where I explained why we might end up having 12 elections, of which we're currently on election number 7. You might have to listen to it one more time to make sure you get it, and I might also. So, having said that, here we are in the last 2 weeks, where the election really is supposed to be getting into high gear. And we've seen how the election at this point, we're seeing no political debates like they have in the United States. I wish that we had political debates. I wish Netanyahu would say, I have nothing to hide. I have nothing to fear. And let's debate Benny Gantz. Let's debate Amir Peretz. Let's debate Avigdor Lieberman. Let's debate Ayman Odeh. Let's debate Ayelet Shaked, and have the leaders in a room together fighting it out on issues. Have the first questions be about the economy, the second questions be about security, be about diplomacy. Make people really outline their plans. I have been invited to very few events where parties actually lay out a platform, with notable exceptions. The Labour Party invited me to a very extensive briefing on their socioeconomic platform. The Democratic Union Party invited me to a very extensive outlining of their environmental platform. If I wanted to listen to climate change stuff for 20 minutes on that, and another half hour on other environmental issues, I would have gone. I didn't. The Yamina Party has managed to put together some kind of list of things that they agree on among the 4 parties. The Likud has no platform on anything. They realize no one is going to read it. Blue and White, actually, you can read their platform online, but everybody says they don't stand for anything. It's there on their website. It doesn't really mean much, and it doesn't really hold them accountable to anything, but they did put out a platform, to their credit. So there are issues in this election, but people don't seem to be taking them into account when they vote. It has been personal. It's been about, yes, Netanyahu or no Netanyahu. It's been about the mistakes that Benny Gantz has been making throughout the campaign that we have been talking about nonstop here on Inside Israel Today. And over the last few days, there has been an opponent that politicians can unite against, which we've seen before, which is the media. That's us. On election night, Netanyahu declared victory over the media. And over the last few days, that is where he has devoted his attention. Just like in his election speech, he did not mention Benny Gantz, who was his actual opponent in the election. Now also, while he has at least acknowledged Benny Gantz's existence in his campaign ads, making fun of him a little bit, Netanyahu still has devoted the major focus to the attack on the media. And as I pointed out in an analysis in the Jerusalem Post, it makes sense to do that. The very extensive poll taken every year called the Democracy Index by the Israel Democracy Institute finds that the media is one of the institutions least trusted in Israel today. And that method of riling up the masses against the media is something that Netanyahu has done successfully time and time again. Here in Israel, it has been repeated by Donald Trump in the United States and by other right-wing politicians around the world. But Netanyahu is very much the founder of that strategy and has found a way to make it very effective. So having said that, though, listeners of this show who have the ability to vote in this election, with all due respect to the people in the United States and other listeners around the world who I appreciate, is that really what you're voting on? Is your hatred of me and other media professionals that much that would make you go to the poll and say, I'm going to stick it to that media? I'm going to put the ballot that says Netanyahu on it in that little envelope over there. Is that what you really care about when you go to vote? Do you not care about security and education and healthcare and social affairs and the way Israel looks around the world? I mean, all of those issues can rightly make you vote for any party. I'm not endorsing any party over here. If issues like security and economy and diplomacy and all those things, if they make you vote for any one of the 31, I believe, parties that there are remaining in this election after Zehut dropped out, then great. But if all those things aren't important to you, you really, really think that going against the media is the most important thing to do on election day, there's a beach somewhere. Go there, relax, turn off your radio, turn off your TV, turn off your internet. Don't bring a print newspaper. Fine, bring a print newspaper. We have to do everything to encourage people reading print newspapers. But that's not what people need to be voting on. That's all I'm going to say. And one last thing. The decision that was made over the last week by Moshe Feiglin to merge together with Likud, I gotta admit, it took me by surprise at first, because there are no listeners who are more active responders to the show, and there are no readers of the Jerusalem Post and followers on Twitter who are more proud of their party than the people who support Zehut. They're small and mighty and very vocal. If they have an election for Prime Minister based on only people who take the time to write talkbacks on the internet and write letters to the editor of print newspapers and write emails to listeners to shows on the Land of Israel network, I think that Moshe Feiglin would become the Prime Minister, because those Zehut people, more power to them. They're an active bunch. Now what are you going to do? Look, I understand that Feiglin got promised a cabinet ministry by someone who has not really kept such promises in the past, Netanyahu. I understand that there are commitments received about medical cannabis, some of which were already implemented in the past, and some still not, and you want to alleviate suffering, and that's beautiful. But are you really going to go vote for Likud now? Is that what you're going to do after debating against Likud supporters on social media and on talkbacks on the internet for so long? Are you really going to swallow your pride and vote for the same party as your neighbor across the street, who you debated every time he took out his garbage? I just don't really see that happening. And I also don't see Zehut people going to that beach on election day. They're not the kind of people who would do that. So I want to encourage the substantial percentage of listeners to Inside Israel Today who vote for Zehut to go on election day to the polling station. Along with the 31 ballots, there will be another stack there. The stack will not say Zehut, because by law, after the agreement was reached on Sunday, 6 million ballots that said on its Zehut that were already ready for the September 17th election were destroyed. But there will be, at every polling station in the country, blank pieces of paper. If you have that courage and that pride in your party that you claim will be running in every election forever, just not this one, according to the agreement reached with Netanyahu, you bring a nice pen into that polling station. It's completely legal. And you can, or pencil or crayon or marker, or maybe even a piece of printed out paper and tape that you can then tape the word Zehut if you don't want to use print writing. Put that on that white ballot and put that in that envelope. And I would like the Central Elections Committee to say, you know what? Those blank ballots, which they're required to count, thousands of them said on it Zehut. Wow. They really care. They really kept their ideology. No part of the agreement says that they're not allowed to write in things on ballots. It just says that they're not allowed to run. Wouldn't it be amazing if there are 140,000 of you people out there, and then even though you signed the deal that you won't run, you still make it into the Knesset? And when they negotiate forming a coalition, if Netanyahu gets the opportunity to form a government, then Feiglin counts under Likud, according to the deal, and Zehut gets a separate cabinet ministry. That's what would have to happen if you get 140,000 of you to write on that blank piece of paper. Look, it's not going to happen, but I challenge you to do it anyway. So I've had my fun over here. 2 more weeks before this election. Stay tuned over here to more excitement in Israeli politics on Inside Israel Today. Thank you from Jerusalem. Bye.
The question is, why are the Jews there in the first place? The Jewish people have been yearning to return to their ancient homeland for a long time.
The Yishai Fleischer Show, the voice of a new generation of pro-Israel activists.
And there's only 2 kinds of minorities in the Middle East, armed or unarmed.
Inspiring minds to think differently.
That jihadism doesn't just attack Jews. It attacks Christians, and it mostly attacks Muslims.
Inspiration, spirituality, and politics.
So first and foremost, this country is here to defend Jewish people and to live in its ancestral homeland.
Listen to the Yishai Fleischer Show every week on the Land of Israel Network at thelandofisrael.com.